Welcome back to the Powerful Communication Podcast. This is Colin Kelly, your skeptical friend in an ever-changing world of social media, digital, PR, and marketing. And just a quick word today about surveys. It always used to irritate our editors when I worked in journalism, when the reporters would use surveys as the basis of news stories. And we used to get emails about this from the boss, and they'd say, look, all these businesses have figured out that all they need to do to get on the news is commission a survey and throw it at you and you're going to run it. And what they would say is, look, you need to establish some journalistic rigor, some testing. Is this survey any good? Is what it's saying actually indicative of something that the audience should know about? Or is it an anomaly? Is it an outlier? Is it based on hardly anyone? And you get a lot of this with politics, and you can kind of make surveys say whatever you want them to say. So what we were always taught, look at who's doing the survey and have they got a vested interest. Look at the sample size, and then if you're still interested, then look at other data sources, look at other surveys and see what they're saying. Do they back each other up? And if they don't, if you think, God, that's strange, that's not what I was expecting, rather than putting it on the news straight away, why don't you use that as a starting point? Why don't you say, well, look, I've got this survey that's suggesting X. Why don't I do some research of my own and see if I can find that as well? Because then if I do, we might be onto something here. So the survey as a starting point, as a sign, a signal, rather than a fully formed news story in its own right. And the one that's prompted me to record this podcast is this survey that Adobe have put out. And the kind of headline stats from the survey, and this is what you're seeing people quoting on blogs and LinkedIn posts and so on, is 39% of Gen Z, so-called Gen Z, start their searches on Pinterest. 39% of Gen Z start their searches on Pinterest. And that's led to quite a few people writing blogs and thought pieces and so on, saying, it's not AI that's killing Google, it's Pinterest. And they're getting their businesses all excited, saying, oh my God, Pinterest is killing Google. Oh, no. Well, let's actually look into it. Okay, let's try and apply some testing and some rigor to this survey and see what it really means for us all. So the first thing is, who commissioned the survey? Do they have a vested interest? Well, the first thing is it's Adobe. So great, they're a well-known, tested, well-respected, credible organisation, commercial organisation. But they've got a physical address. They're accountable. We know who they are. Okay, so there's a bit of trust there with Adobe. Do they have a vested interest? I would say that's a maybe. Because clearly Adobe has an interest in anything visual, as does Pinterest. So if Adobe can establish Pinterest, or if Adobe can engage Pinterest users or wannabe Pinterest users, people thinking of joining Pinterest or needing content for Pinterest, they might use Adobe to create that as opposed to, say, something like Canva. So does Adobe have a vested interest in promoting Pinterest? I would say possibly. Then we look at the sample size of the survey. Now, it's not true to say that a small sample size is no use and a large sample size is better. It might be, but a small, very well-run survey with a lot of transparency could be perfectly legitimate, and a large sample size with poor questioning, leading questions, there's been kind of sloppily put together. Are these people just serial survey participants, or, who have we got? So it's not necessarily that small's bad and large is good. They have given us a sample size, 800 people and 200 businesses, all of whom were active Pinterest users. Right, so this is the big thing for me, is everyone that took part is an active Pinterest user. It's not indicative of the general population, because the general population are not active Pinterest users. Some of them are, but as a general population, the general person is not an active Pinterest user. So 800 people, 200 businesses. Of the 800 people, 16%, that's 128, were so-called Gen Z, right? So 128 people in this survey, Gen Z. And of that 128, 39% of them said, yes, I begin my searches on Pinterest. So 39% of 128. Now, to me, the story there is 61% of Pinterest users, Gen Z Pinterest users, don't use Pinterest as their search engine. Right? To me, that should encourage Google rather than threaten Google, that even people that use Pinterest still go to Google for their searches. And there's other surveys that back that up. If we look at this year's We Are Social survey, which is a survey of surveys, so it's a compilation of all sorts of surveys. It's a mega survey, if you like, with a much larger sample size and various data sources from people with no immediate commercial gain or interest in pushing one trend above another. They're kind of sitting independently and just gathering data. That We Are Social report found that 93.25% of all internet searches use Google. That's 93.25% of all internet searches use Google. So your 39% of 128 people, all searches on Pinterest, let alone all Gen Z searches on Pinterest, basically account for 6 and a bit % of internet searches. Don't get me wrong, we've known for years that Pinterest sends traffic to your website. You only need to look at your Google Analytics and you'll probably see some traffic coming from Pinterest. And if you've no idea what Pinterest is or how it works and you never looked at it, it's maybe worth a look. Again, that We Are Social report, which I think is far more reliable than the Adobe one just because of the numbers of people involved, it said that 20% of Pinterest's users are 16 to 24-year-old women. 7% are 16 to 24-year-old males. So there's definitely something going on, particularly with younger women using Pinterest. There's definitely something there. And I suppose if they're there, then yes, some of them will use Pinterest as their search engine of choice. And maybe some of them won't use Google. But is all of that enough to upend a marketing strategy? Is that enough to spend time doing anything this week in this busy world that you live? Does that merit a blog post or a LinkedIn post saying it won't be AI that kills Google, it will be Pinterest? I always say anyone that claims to know what's going on should be treated with the utmost skepticism. I think that's an interesting survey from Adobe. Pinterest is an interesting place. It might have value for your business. Equally, opening your window and screaming your sales messages out your window, or putting an advert in the newsagent's window, or sponsoring your local football team might have an impact on your business. Be really careful with these surveys. Treat everything with skepticism. Be careful. Try and find the source of some of these blogs and LinkedIn pieces that you're reading, and try and look at other sources of information, put it all together, and decide what to do. And always remember the golden rule. If you can keep a cool head while all around are losing theirs, you'll probably do quite well. Thanks very much for listening. Remember, share this with someone who needs it.